Hey guys, tonight we are marching into the impossible, into air so thin it cuts your lungs like glass, into mountains so vast they swallow entire legions, into the white silence where the world forgets it ever made sense. You can almost hear the crunch of sandals on ice, the hiss of breath freezing mid-exhale, the muffled thud of hooves wrapped in wool. It is the late autumn of 218 before the birth of Christ. And somewhere below you the plains of Gaul are already fading behind a wall of snow. Ahead lies Italy, warm, rich and waiting. But between you and that promise rises the spine of the world, the Alps. Hannibal stands at the head of the army, his cloak stiff with frost, his eyes burning with that peculiar kind of madness that convinces men to follow him into death's rehearsal space. 30,000 soldiers, 12,000 horses, and 37 elephants. It sounds like a boast from mythology, but it's real, and it's cold enough to make even the gods shiver. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And while you're at it, drop your location and local time in the comments. I always love seeing where in the world you're listening from, whether you're in a warm apartment somewhere near the Mediterranean, or bundled under a blanket with the hum of a fan pretending to be the mountain wind. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn that fan just a little lower for the soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together, through ice, through history, and through a war that froze its own legend. The march begins before dawn when the stars still hang low and cruel, and the men's breath moves like ghosts between them. The ground beneath your feet is no longer earth, but a crust of frost over stone, slick and unforgiving. Each step feels like walking on glass. The Romans, far below the mountains, far from this nightmare, will one day remember this crossing as a feat of defiance. But here, in the brittle half-light, it feels less like glory, and more like a wager against nature. Hannibal doesn't give speeches now. His voice has become a thing of frost and economy. The men no longer need inspiration, they need survival. Every order he gives, climb, hold, haul, comes out as a white cloud, a command that evaporates in the air as quickly as it's spoken. The Carthaginian columns snake upward in slow agony, a living chain of armor, leather, and exhaustion. The mules grunt beneath their loads of grain and wine, their hooves slipping on the frozen rock. The elephants, the beasts that once made entire armies tremble, lumber through the snow like displaced gods, their breath rising in columns of steam. You can smell them before you see them, a heavy musk of animal heat and fear that cuts through the clean cold of the mountain air. One of them trumpets, a sound so deep it shakes the icicles loose from a cliffside. For a moment, the echo almost sounds like laughter, the mountain mocking their audacity. As daylight crawls over the peaks, the world reveals itself in shades of white and grey, a landscape stripped of mercy. You can barely tell where the sky ends and the ground begins. It's all one endless expanse of frozen possibility. The men's faces are cracked from windburn, their lips split, their eyes narrowed to slits. They march not out of loyalty now, but because stopping means dying faster. You feel the strange rhythm of it, the crunch of feet, the jingle of metal, the soft thud of snow falling from ledges. It's almost musical, this choreography of suffering. Hannibal rides a horse now, the only warmth coming from the animal's body beneath him. His armor is rimmed with frost, his beard flecked white. Every so often, he turns back to look at the line of men stretching behind him like a dark vein through the snow. He says nothing. He doesn't need to. He knows that to speak of hardship would make it real, and right now the illusion of progress is the only thing keeping the army moving. You can imagine what the soldiers think about as they climb. Not Rome, not conquest. Those ideas belong to the valley, to summer, to warmth. Up here, thought shrinks to the size of breath. One inhalation, one exhalation. They think of fingers, of toes, of the fragile flame inside their chests that must be kept burning. One soldier hums softly to himself, an old Carthaginian lullaby, and others pick it up. the tune moving down the line like a whisper of home. The sound is fragile, absurd even, in a place where silence feels like the native language. The path narrows. Sheer drops open on either side, thousands of feet down to valleys hidden under fog. You can feel the vertigo tug at your stomach as you step carefully over ice-slick rock. The men lash themselves together with ropes, not out of trust, but mutual insurance. If one falls, at least the rest will know where the edge is. Somewhere above, a stone dislodges, clattering down and vanishing into the white. Nobody looks up. The mountains are alive here, and it's best not to remind them you exist. By midday, the snow starts again. Not the gentle kind that makes the world seem peaceful, but the hard, dry flakes that sting when they hit your face. Visibility drops to a few meters. The line of men dissolves into silhouettes. You can hear the officers shouting to keep formation, their voices muffled by the storm. The elephants trumpet nervously, sensing the danger long before the men do, and then, a sound, low, guttural, wrong, a rumble that seems to come from the bones of the mountain itself. Someone yells a warning, but it's too late. The avalanche begins like a whisper and ends like the sky collapsing. Snow and rock and air fuse into one unstoppable wall. You dive sideways, pressed against the ground as the world turns white. You can't breathe. You can't hear. The noise is beyond sound, a roar that vibrates inside your ribs. When it passes, the silence afterward feels obscene. You open your eyes and see what's left. A slope of churned snow, a few shields half buried, the tip of an elephant's tusk protruding from the drift like a monument. Men dig frantically with their hands, calling names that vanish into the air. Some find nothing. Others find too much. Hannibal appears through the haze, his face ghost pale, his eyes blazing with something between rage and disbelief. He orders the survivors to keep moving. Morning can wait until there's warmth again, which means never. The army shrinks but marches on. The pass climbs higher still, into air that burns the lungs and freezes the mind. Nights bring temperatures so low that the oil in lamps congeals, so the men light fires with splintered spears and bits of saddle leather. The snow glows blue in the moonlight, a beauty that feels almost cruel. You huddle near one of those fires, your hands cupped around the fragile flame. The heat doesn't reach your bones, but it gives the illusion of life. Around you, men sleep in clusters, wrapped in cloaks stiff with frost, their bodies instinctively drawn together like animals in a storm. The elephants stand silent, their great ears drooping, frost clinging to their lashes. One collapses in the night without a sound. The next morning, the soldiers strip its hide for warmth. Even in death, the beasts serve. The mountain doesn't care. It shifts, it breathes, it tests. Each new day brings another slope steeper than the last. When the army reaches a crest, the view almost breaks them. Endless white ridges stretching into infinity. Hannibal dismounts, drives his spear into the snow and points east. Italy lies there, he says, though his voice is little more than vapor in the wind. You can't see Italy. You can barely see the next step. But they believe him because belief is lighter to carry than despair. That night, the wind howls like a living thing. It seeps through armor, through wool, through skin. You lie awake, counting breaths, each one a small rebellion. Somewhere nearby, a soldier laughs, a strange high sound that turns quickly to coughing. He's found a scrap of wine frozen solid in its skin bag, and is sucking on it like a piece of candy. The others watch, too tired to be jealous. Hannibal himself sits apart, his cloak drawn tight, his mind already ahead of the mountains in the valleys where he imagines victory waiting. He has crossed more than geography now. He's crossed the border between ambition and obsession. When dawn comes, it's cruelly bright. The snow reflects the sun like a mirror, blinding, merciless. The men wrap rags over their faces, leaving only slits for eyes. You can feel the sting of light even behind your lids. The descent begins, slower, more dangerous than the climb. The path is narrow, glazed with ice, The drop bottomless. Every few minutes, another mule slides, tumbling silently into the clouds below. The men stop counting. Their world has narrowed to one step, one breath, one heartbeat that refuses to stop. Halfway down, they find an outcrop where the rock gleams dark and wet. A trickle of water beneath the ice. Hannibal calls a halt. He kneels, presses his palm against the stone and frowns. The pass is blocked ahead by a wall of solid ice, smooth and glistening like glass. It stretches across the mountain like a gate built by the gods to keep men out. The soldiers mutter prayers, curses, anything to fill the silence. Hannibal stands slowly, his expression unreadable. Then he gives an order that sounds insane. Light fires, as many as you can. They pile wood, oil, anything that burns. The flames leap high, licking at the ice. Steam hisses, then freezes mid-air. When the fires die down, Hannibal shouts again, "Pour wine on it." The soldiers stare, confused. Wine is life here, liquid warmth. But he insists they obey. The moment the warm wine hits the hot rock, the ice cracks with a sound like thunder. Shards fall away, revealing a narrow passage. It's madness and genius in equal measure. Chemistry by desperation. For a brief instant you can almost believe in miracles. The army moves through the gap, one by one, silent, solemn, their breath hanging in the air like incense. Behind them the fires smolder, the last warmth they'll see for days. When the last soldier passes, the mountain groans again, sealing the path behind them with fresh snow. It's as if the Alps themselves are swallowing the evidence of their defiance. By the time they reach the next ridge, night has fallen again. You can see the stars through a break in the clouds, hard, glittering points that feel close enough to touch. Below, the valleys of Italy stretch in shadow, warmer, greener, alive. Some men weep openly. Others just stare, too numb for emotion. Hannibal looks down at the world he's been chasing and smiles for the first time in weeks. It's not joy, it's recognition. He's made it across the impossible, though the price has been carved into his army's bones. The survivors camp one last night in the snow. Fires burn low. Men sleep curled like question marks, and the elephants that remain stand motionless, as if carved from ice. You sit awake, staring into the darkness, listening to the slow sigh of the wind. Somewhere out there, the ghosts of those lost in the avalanche whisper through the drifts, their armor still gleaming faintly under the moonlight. You wonder if Hannibal hears them too. Maybe he does. Maybe that's what keeps him from sleeping. When morning comes, it's strangely still. The wind has died. The sky is the color of iron. The first rays of sun turn the snow pink, almost tender. You take a deep breath. It burns, but it's life. The descent into Italy begins, and with it, history shifts. Behind you lies the mountain, indifferent and eternal. Ahead, the promise of war, of victory, of stories that will be told around fires long after the frost has claimed the bones of the men who made them. You look back one last time. The trail you carved into the ice is already disappearing, swallowed by snow. In a few hours there will be no sign you were ever here. And yet, somehow, that feels right. The mountains don't keep monuments. They keep secrets. The sun rises reluctantly, as though ashamed to witness what remains of the army. You move downhill now, your legs trembling from exhaustion, the path twisting through cliffs that glisten like frozen glass. Every breath feels like inhaling knives. The soldiers have stopped speaking altogether. Words seem wasteful when even silence costs energy. You hear only the crunch of boots and the faint, rhythmic groan of wooden carts dragging supplies that are now more ghost than cargo. Above, the peaks burn gold under the first light, magnificent and indifferent, as if mocking the human arrogance that thought they could be crossed by willpower alone. Hannibal rides ahead on a white horse that steams like a furnace against the cold. His face has taken on that strange expression great men wear when history is actively rewriting itself beneath their feet. Equal parts exhaustion and euphoria. He has lost half his men, most of his animals, and nearly all sense of mercy. But he has not lost the idea, and in war, ideas march farther than flesh ever can. You catch sight of his profile in the glare of morning, eyes narrowed, jaw set, and it hits you that this isn't courage you're seeing, it's obsession turned to muscle. The air grows thinner with every mile, you feel it in your chest, a slow ache that turns into something heavier. The cold here isn't the kind you fight, it's the kind that seeps into you and becomes part of your blood. Men begin to stumble, frostbite blooms across fingers like dark flowers. A few simply stop walking, sit down in the snow and close their eyes. No one drags them up. The living no longer have enough life to share. The officers try to record numbers, but even ink freezes solid, so they start carving tallies into the wood of their spears instead. The slope levels briefly, and the army spreads out across a narrow plateau that feels like the top of the world. The wind has stripped the snow away here, revealing patches of stone scarred by ancient glaciers. The ground crunches with salt and ice crystals that shimmer like crushed glass. Somewhere below, hidden by fog, the Alpine valleys stretch toward Italy. You can almost smell the difference. Faint, green, impossible. For a moment, the men straighten their backs. You feel the illusion of warmth simply because the wind has stopped trying to kill you. Then you hear it. The sound of something massive struggling for air. One of the elephants collapses to its knees, its trunk dragging through the snow. The soldiers rush forward, shouting, but there's nothing to be done. Its eyes glaze over, lashes rimmed with frost, and with one final breath, the creature exhales steam like a dying volcano. The silence that follows is absolute. Even the mountain seems to hold its breath. You stand there, surrounded by men who have forgotten how to mourn. The body steams gently as it cools, the snow hissing as if even nature respects the size of its passing. Hannibal dismounts, walks to the carcass and lays a hand on its side. No words. Then he turns away. The march continues. You wonder if anyone will ever believe this story. The idea that an army crossed these peaks at all feels like myth, a thing sung by poets, not endured by mortals. But you can see it in every step. The myth is made of blisters and frostbite, not legend. When you look down the path, you can still see the footprints, the scars in the snow from dragging sledges and beasts. History isn't written in ink here, it's etched into ice. By midday, the weather turns again. Clouds boil up from the south, heavy and blue, promising more snow. The officers order the men to make camp near a bend in the pass where the rock forms a shallow bowl. You gather wood, brittle, wind-dried roots ripped from the mountainside, and coax a fire from the shivering air. The flames sputter weakly, their light distorted by frost crystals. Around it men huddle, forming a living wall against the wind. The smell of smoke mingles with sweat and damp leather, creating that particular perfume of human endurance, half courage, half decay. You try to eat, but the salted meat has frozen solid. Someone breaks it with the hilt of a sword. The rations are dwindling. The taste of hunger has replaced the taste of food. You chew until your jaw aches, swallow half-frozen water, and feel it burn all the way down. Across the fire, a Numidian scout laughs softly and mutters something about how even the gods would die up here. Nobody argues. That night, as the storm hits, you lie under a shared blanket of hides, your breath trapped inside the small dome of warmth the fire provides. The snow falls sideways, rattling against helmets, burying half the camp within an hour. You can hear the elephants shifting uneasily, their chains clinking like wind chimes. The wind finds every gap in your armor and tests it, probing with invisible fingers. It has the patience of eternity. In the small hours, someone begins to sing. It's low, wordless, a hum that threads through the howling. You realize it's a prayer, though, to which God you can't tell. Perhaps to any who will listen. The sound spreads, others joining, Carthaginians, Gauls, Iberians, languages blending into one weary harmony. The mountains echo it back, multiplied and ghostly. For a moment, it sounds as though the dead are answering. When morning comes, the world looks newly made, blank and smooth and cruelly beautiful. The storm has erased half the camp, filling in tents and trenches alike. You dig yourself free, fingers numb, face raw. The fires have gone out, leaving behind little black craters in the snow. It's hard to tell what's more shocking, the silence or the brightness. Sunlight bounces off the snow so fiercely it hurts to open your eyes. The survivors move slowly, mechanically, like people operating their bodies from a distance. You glance at Hannibal. His expression hasn't changed. If anything, he looks more alive than before, as if each death sharpens the blade of his resolve. You remember stories that he once swore an oath as a child, to hate Rome until death. Maybe this is what oaths look like when kept too long. You can almost admire it, the purity of his obsession. The descent continues, cruel in its promise of relief. Gravity is no friend here. It drags men downward faster than their balance can follow. The snow hides crevasses deep enough to swallow entire squads. The air smells faintly of pine now, the first hint of life returning, but it's mixed with something darker, the metallic tang of blood. The men tie ropes around their waists, lowering one another like cargo inch by inch. Every few meters a shout goes up. Another man lost, another mule gone. You stop reacting. At one point, the path narrows to the width of a single man. To your right, a wall of ice towers higher than any cathedral. To your left, the abyss waits, blue and endless. You press your palm to the ice as you pass, half for balance, half for reverence. It's smooth and impossibly cold, as if touching the skin of the planet itself. Beneath your hand you feel faint vibrations, not sound exactly but movement, the slow shifting of glaciers grinding against rock. It feels alive, it feels eternal. By dusk you reach a ledge overlooking a valley drenched in golden light. It's Italy, or what passes for it. Green shadows, soft air, the suggestion of soil instead of stone. The men cheer weakly, a sound more like coughing than triumph. You see Hannibal stop, lift his arm and point. There, he says simply, the land of Rome. No one answers. Words seem too fragile to carry this far. They make camp one last time before descending into the warmer world. You find yourself staring back up at the peaks, now blazing red in the sunset. Somewhere up there lie the bodies of your comrades, frozen mid-step, preserved forever in a silence no historian will hear. The wind moves between the cliffs, low and mournful, carrying what might be the echo of armor or simply the mountain remembering. You realize then that this is what glory feels like. Not triumph, but survival so fragile it could break if you breathe too hard. The cold has taken more than lives. It has taken the noise out of ambition, leaving only the whisper of endurance. You close your eyes and in the red light behind your lids the mountains still burn. Later, as darkness falls, the fires flicker weakly against the vastness of the Alps. The stars come out, too many to count, too sharp to wish upon. Hannibal stands alone at the edge of camp, looking south. You wonder what he sees. Rome, destiny, or simply another battlefield waiting beyond the next horizon. The snow beneath his boots creaks, the sound small against the immensity around him. He doesn't move for a long time. And then, without ceremony, the march resumes. The army, what's left of it, descends into Italy like ghosts carrying the smell of smoke and frost. The mountain, behind you, exhales. The wind smooths over your footprints. The silence returns, patient as ever. History will call this bravery. But up here, it feels more like surrender. The first step onto Italian soil feels wrong. It is soft. The ground no longer rings like stone but yields beneath your boots, damp with melted snow and decay. You almost don't trust it. After weeks of white silence, color feels like hallucination. Green moss clinging to rock, brown soil bleeding through ice. A single bird darting low across the mist. For a moment the men just stand there, squinting as though the world has been reborn too bright. Then someone laughs, a cracked, dry laugh that sounds almost like coughing, and the spell breaks. The army moves again, limping ghosts emerging from winter's mouth. The valley below is narrow and steep, hemmed in by cliffs that sweat water as the snow melts above. Streams gush down like veins opening in the earth. You can hear them before you see them. The sound of thaw, of release, of life returning. It is almost too beautiful to trust. You find yourself touching your armor as if to confirm that you're still real. The air smells different here, heavier, carrying the faint sweetness of pine resin and the sour musk of damp leaves. It feels thick enough to drink. You take a deep breath and cough. Your lungs don't know how to handle air that isn't made of ice. Behind you, the mountain looms, vast and unmoved, already erasing the line between life and death. You can almost hear it whispering, not words, but memory. It keeps everything, the frozen mules, the silent dead, the cracked shields buried in drifts. Nothing is lost there, only preserved. The mountain is the perfect historian. It remembers without caring. The men stumble downhill, following the narrow track carved by melted snow. Hannibal rides at the front again, his cloak torn and stiff with frost, his horse's flanks streaked with salt and blood. He doesn't look back anymore. There is nothing behind worth remembering. His officers ride close, their faces hollow, eyes reflecting the dull light of the valley. Even victory feels like an afterthought now. They have crossed the Alps, a line between possible and impossible, but at what cost? Out of the 40,000 who began the march, fewer than half now walk beside you. The rest remain somewhere in the snow, entombed in a monument built by the sky. The descent is treacherous. What was once snow becomes mud, thick and sucking at your boots. Rocks slide underfoot. Men slip, curse, laugh deliriously. At one point, the trail narrows into a ledge only a few feet wide, and you have to press yourself flat against the cliff, while the last elephant, yes, one has survived, squeezes past, its hide steaming in the damp air. The soldiers stroke its trunk as it passes. Superstition more than affection. The beast looks half blind, its eyes milky with exhaustion. But it keeps moving, obedient to a dream larger than itself. You realize it is the perfect symbol for this army. Magnificent, absurd, unstoppable, only because it does not know how to stop. By midday, the air grows warmer. Meltwater drips from branches and you hear birdsong. Tentative, cautious, like a forgotten language returning. The soldiers remove their helmets, letting the wind touch their skin for the first time in weeks. Their hair, crusted white with salt, now shines damp and dark. Some of them laugh quietly, others cry without meaning to. One man kneels and presses his lips to the earth. You can almost taste his relief in the air. The first village appears like a mirage, a scattering of huts at the base of a slope, smoke rising thinly from fires. The locals stare as the army descends upon them, an avalanche of men who look less human than elemental. The villagers flee at first sight, thinking ghosts have come down from the mountains. Hannibal sends envoys ahead, not to demand surrender but food. What they receive is a mixture of fear and pity. The locals bring bread, goats, and whatever grain they can spare. In exchange they are promised protection, from whom no one knows, perhaps from the mountain itself. The army eats in silence like men relearning the act. The bread tastes alien, almost too rich after weeks of salted leather and frozen meat. You can feel it hit your stomach like heat spreading outward. Wine flows again, real wine, not the bitter resinous syrup they carried in skin bags. It burns your throat in the best possible way. For the first time, laughter sounds natural. Someone plays a reed pipe, its melody thin but alive. You realize how long it's been since anyone has sung without fear. But warmth brings memory, and memory brings ghosts. That night, as fires burn along the valley floor, the men tell stories of the crossing, each tale taller than the last. They describe avalanches that swallowed battalions, cliffs that spoke in thunder, ice that cracked under their feet and revealed the abyss. Some speak of seeing gods in the snow, shapes moving alongside them at night. Hannibal listens, silent, his eyes reflecting the flames. When someone asks if he saw the same things, he only says, "The gods walk with those who dare their mountains." It's the closest thing to poetry he's ever said. You lie awake under the stars, staring at the faint shimmer of the peaks you just escaped. They don't look menacing now, only distant, glowing faintly in the moonlight like sleeping giants. You feel a strange affection for them, the way survivors sometimes feel toward their near killers. The night is warmer here, but your body still shivers, as if the cold has settled permanently in your bones. You close your eyes and can still hear the wind of the pass, that long, low moan that sounded less like air and more like eternity speaking in its sleep. In the morning, the army begins to reorganize. The surviving officers count what remains: 20,000 foot soldiers, 6,000 cavalry, and a handful of elephants. The numbers are obscene, but Hannibal treats them like victory. His lieutenants look at him as if he's either a prophet or a madman, which in history are often the same thing. He orders scouts ahead toward the Pol Valley. Rome lies beyond, oblivious to what is coming. The cold, it turns out, was only the first enemy. As you march onward, the terrain softens into forest and river, but the men still move like they expect the ground to betray them. Every creak of branch, every snap of twig draws glances skyward, as if another avalanche might fall from the clouds. Trauma lingers in the muscles long after it leaves the mountains. You can see it in their eyes, the flinch when wind touches their faces, the habit of sleeping too close to fires. They've become creatures of survival now, less soldiers than wanderers who remember discipline like a half-forgotten prayer. You pass through meadows that would have been paradise in another life. Soft grass, streams full of fish, the air rich with the scent of earth. But the men can't enjoy it. The beauty feels like mockery after so much suffering. You can almost hear the mountains laughing behind you, the laughter of something too big to hate. Every rustle of leaves sounds like snow falling. Every breeze carries the ghost of frost. At dusk, the sky turns the color of molten bronze. You stop at a ridge where the valley opens wide, revealing distant plains bathed in gold. Hannibal halts his horse, turns to the men, and raises his hand. "There lies Italy," he says. The words drift on the wind, thin and brittle but enough to ignite the embers of belief. The soldiers cheer, hoarse, broken voices echoing down the slopes. It is not joy, it's release. The Alps are behind them. The war is ahead. That night, as fires burn low, you find yourself wondering how the Romans will react when they see this ghost army descending from the mountains. Half dead, frostbitten, wrapped in rags, but carrying eyes full of something terrifying. The knowledge that they've already survived the impossible. You realize that's the true weapon Hannibal forged in the Alps. Not elephants, not tactics, but men who have looked death in the face and kept walking. When you finally drift toward sleep, you dream not of battle but of snow, endless, white and silent. In the dream, you're back on the mountain, standing beside a fire that never goes out, the air filled with the slow hum of memory. You can't tell whether you're alive or frozen, whether this is victory or aftermath. The mountain doesn't care. It never did, it only remembers. And somewhere far above, under a sky littered with stars, the wind moves through the passes again, steady, eternal, carrying with it the faint sound of footsteps that never really stopped. You wake before dawn to the sound of dripping, water running down from the slopes, each drop like a heartbeat reminding you the world is thawing. The air feels heavy now, wet instead of sharp. The wind smells of earth, pine and decay. When you inhale, your chest no longer burns. It aches differently, like lungs relearning softness. The men rise slowly, joints stiff, armor streaked with rust from the melt. Every motion carries a strange reverence, as though they fear moving too fast might wake the ghosts still sleeping in the mountains behind them. The valley opens wider as you march. Green slopes stretch on either side, streaked with white veins of snowmelt. The rivers run wild, narrow silver serpents cutting through the earth with the ferocity of rebirth. For the first time in weeks, you see reflections in water, faces that no longer look human but carved from stone and frost. Sunlight dances on the current, cruelly beautiful. The soldiers look away. Beauty feels like temptation here, a thing that promises comfort they no longer trust. Hannibal rides ahead, eyes fixed toward the horizon. His mind is already beyond the valley, beyond the Alps, somewhere in the plains where Rome's armies wait unknowingly, but his body betrays fatigue. His cloak hangs loose on his shoulders, the once rich fabric worn to threads. Even his horse stumbles now and then, yet the fire in his expression never dims. You can feel it radiating from him, that feverish conviction that borders on faith. The men follow because they can't imagine doing anything else. At midday, the army halts at a river crossing. The current is fast, swollen with meltwater, cold enough to numb skin in seconds. The bridge that once spanned it has collapsed, its supports jutting like broken teeth from the water. Hannibal dismounts, surveys the damage, and gives the order to build rafts. The men groan but obey. Axes ring against timber, ropes creak, curses mix with laughter that sounds dangerously close to madness. You work until your hands bleed, and still the current rips apart half of what you make. The Alps have released you, but their cruelty lingers in every obstacle the land throws your way. When the first raft finally holds, Hannibal steps aboard himself, a gesture as reckless as it is inspiring. The men watch as he grips the rope and shouts for them to pull. The raft lurches into the river, spinning, creaking, vanishing briefly in mist. For a heartbeat you think you've lost him. Then through the spray you see him standing, drenched but upright, his cloak snapping in the wind like a banner of defiance. He raises one arm and calls out something you can't quite hear over the rush of water. But the meaning travels anyway. The army roars. They drag the remaining rafts into the current. For the first time since the mountains, the men move not from fear but from momentum. By evening, the far bank is a chaos of mud, bodies, and exhaustion. Fires flicker weakly in the damp air. Horses tremble, their sides heaving. The elephants stand knee-deep in the shallows, trumpeting softly like mourners. Hannibal moves among the men, checking wounds, clapping shoulders, murmuring praise. He speaks not as a general now, but as a survivor among survivors. For a brief moment he looks almost human, tired, soaked, but alive. You realize that's what leadership really is in this kind of war. Not the ability to command, but the ability to keep breathing when everyone else has forgotten how. That night, the clouds break. The stars appear, sharp, cold, impossibly distant. You lie on your back, staring up at them, and think of home. It feels absurd now, the idea of places where fields are green and food comes from soil instead of frost. The men talk quietly, their voices soft and uncertain. Someone mentions that Rome must surely think them dead by now. Another replies that perhaps that's for the best. Surprise is the one ally that never demands rations. You smile despite yourself. There's humor even here, buried under the exhaustion like a coal refusing to die. A scout returns just before dawn, his cloak dark with dew. He kneels before Hannibal and speaks in a rush. The Roman allies in the valley below have fortified their towns. Word of the army's approach has spread. The Alpine ordeal is over, but the real war is about to begin. Hannibal listens, his expression unreadable, then dismisses the man with a nod. "Good," he says softly. "Let them know we survived." The words hang in the air like a promise, or a threat. The march resumes under a low grey sky. The terrain softens, but the air grows warmer still. You can feel the weight of altitude leaving your lungs, replaced by something heavier, humidity, the smell of life returning. The men begin to shed their furs, revealing armor beneath, dented and rusted but still serviceable. The sound of their movement changes too. No more the dull crunch of snow. Now it's mud sucking at boots, the slap of water against leather. You can almost hear the world waking up around you. At one point, The column passes a hillside dotted with wild flowers, the first color you've seen in months. Purple and yellow blooms nod gently in the wind. The soldiers pause, staring as though confronted by sorcery. One man reaches out and plucks a flower, tucking it behind his ear. The others laugh softly, but not unkindly. You realize how fragile life has become, so fragile that even a flower feels like a rebellion. By midday, the sun breaks through. Its warmth feels alien on your skin, almost painful. The men tilt their faces upward like plants, eyes closed, mouths open. You do the same, and for a moment you taste light, but warmth brings other things too. Smell, sound, memory. The odor of sweat and rot returns, the buzzing of insects, the distant echo of rushing water. Life, yes, but also decay. You begin to wonder whether the mountains were simpler. At least up there, everything was pure, even death. Hannibal halts the column at a clearing near a stand of pines. He dismounts, removes his gauntlets, and kneels to touch the soil. His fingers dig into it as though testing its loyalty. Italy, he murmurs again. You can see him calculating, imagining the next move, alliances, supply lines, terrain. He's thinking like a general again. The mountains have not broken him. They've refined him like iron tempered by fire and ice. That night, the fires burn higher. The men eat better. Grain porridge, goat meat, even a little wine. They talk louder, gesture more, rediscovering the art of noise. You listen, smiling faintly, as they argue about who killed the most Romans in the battles yet to come, each pretending the future will be easier than the past. You know better. The Alps will never really release them. Their minds will always hear the crunch of snow, the hiss of wind through armor. The mountains leave marks deeper than scars. You wander to the edge of camp, away from the laughter. The valley spreads out below, silver in moonlight, dotted with mist. You can see the faint outline of Roman roads cutting across the plains, straight, disciplined, human. You think of the contrast, the ordered geometry of empire versus the wild, indifferent chaos of the Alps. Hannibal has crossed from one world into another, dragging both behind him. You wonder which will kill him first. The wind shifts, carrying the faintest scent of salt from the distant sea. You close your eyes and let it wash over you. Somewhere far behind, snow is falling again, erasing the last tracks of your passage. Somewhere ahead, Rome is sleeping, unaware that an army carved from frost and madness is coming for it. You open your eyes to the darkness and feel the old calm return, that stillness between fear and awe that only great cold can teach. And as the firelight flickers behind you, you realize the strangest truth of all. The mountain is still in you. Its silence, its patience, its indifference. You've brought it down from the peaks like a relic, a frozen god carried in your chest. It will not leave you now, not even in warmth. The morning comes soft and golden, but the light feels dishonest. Too warm, too easy, too alive. You march anyway, boots sinking into mud that smells of thawed earth and old dreams. The men move differently now, their steps heavier, not from exhaustion but from disbelief that the ground no longer tries to kill them. The air is thick with moisture, carrying the sweet rot of leaves and the distant hum of insects. For the first time in what feels like centuries, you hear birdsong not as omen but as invitation. Still, none of you dare to sing back. You have crossed into Italy, but the Alps haven't truly let you go. The path winds along a ridge above a vast valley. Below you can see villages scattered like stones dropped by a careless god. Thin columns of smoke rise into the morning haze. Hannibal halts the army to look down, and for the first time since the crossing his face changes. You can see it even from where you stand, the faintest smile tugging at his mouth, equal parts relief and vengeance. Rome will hear of this, he murmurs, not as a boast but as a prophecy. The men cheer weakly, voices cracking, the sound drifting over the valley like ghosts celebrating their own survival. But survival is fragile. Even here in this softer land, hunger gnaws at you. The supplies lost to the mountains cannot be replaced overnight. The soldiers scavenge what they can: roots, wild herbs, small animals too slow to flee. When they find a farmhouse abandoned, they fall upon it like wolves. Bread, cheese, grain, anything becomes sacred. The few locals who remain watch from afar, half in terror, half in awe of these frost-bitten invaders who have crawled out of the sky. The stories will spread faster than the soldiers themselves. Demons from the Alps, men who command elephants, ghosts who eat snow and survive. You see one of the elephants up close that afternoon, its skin cracked like old parchment, its eyes milky with fatigue. Steam rises from its body in the warmth, the smell of animal sweat and resin thick in the air. It moves slowly but stubbornly, each step a defiance of logic. The handlers whisper to it in their own tongue, soothing it with words that sound more like lullabies than commands. When it lifts its trunk to trumpet, the sound is no longer thunder but mourning. You can feel it in your chest, a reminder that everything surviving this far has already paid too much. Hannibal rides beside the elephant, his gaze fixed on the horizon. Every few miles he pauses to study the terrain, sketching routes in the air with his gloved hand, muttering about rivers and passes. His mind has already left the Alps behind and entered the geography of war. You can see the calculation in his movements. How many men to rest, where to camp, how far to push before Rome even realizes he exists. The cold forged him into something sharper, something almost unnatural. The mountain burned away everything but purpose. By midday, the army reaches a small plateau overlooking the plains of the Pole. It's the first truly open landscape you've seen since the climb began. Wide, golden, endless. The sight makes the men restless. They stare as though afraid the flatness might swallow them next. Down there, Rome's allies farm the land, harvest grain, raise cattle, civilization, warmth. You feel the ache of distance in your bones, as if your body remembers snow and resents this sudden softness. The camp that night feels different. The men laugh louder, drink deeper, argue more freely. Fires flicker across the hillside, each one a small declaration of existence. The soldiers sing again, real songs this time, bawdy and off-key, carried on air that smells faintly of rain. You sit near the edge of one of the fires, staring into the flames. They no longer remind you of survival but of memory, of those nights in the Alps where a single spark meant defiance. The difference now is comfort, and somehow that feels almost shameful. Hannibal walks through the camp quietly, stopping to speak with small groups of men. He doesn't shout, doesn't demand attention. He just listens. His voice when he speaks is low and steady, like the sound of a blade being sharpened. He tells them that this is only the beginning, that Rome still waits across the rivers, proud and unbroken. Yet you can hear the exhaustion in him too. He's human enough to know that surviving the mountains was a miracle, but proud enough to pretend it was inevitable. When he disappears into his tent, the men lower their voices instinctively, as if the night itself listens for his next command. Sometime after midnight, the rain begins. Soft at first, a fine mist that settles over the camp, then heavier, drumming on helmets and shields. The fires hiss and shrink. You pull your cloak tight, the damp seeping into your skin. The earth turns to mud again, that same sucking weight pulling at your boots. You close your eyes, and despite yourself, imagine snow. You miss it, not the pain of it, but the purity. Rain is too alive. It smells of rot and life continuing. Snow at least had the decency to be silent. In the grey morning that follows, the camp steams under the weak sun. The men rise shivering, hungover on warmth. Scouts report Roman patrols in the distance. Riders glimpsed between trees, flashes of bronze and red. The reality of the war returns, sharp as steel. Hannibal gathers his officers around a makeshift map drawn in mud. You watch from a distance as he gestures with a stick, marking routes, supply lines, ambush points. The word Trebia is spoken, a river, a trap, a place where the frozen army will remind the world it still exists. You don't yet know the details, only the feeling that history is shifting again. The march continues southward, the land flattening, the air growing heavy with promise. The men find rhythm again, the steady beat of feet, the occasional clatter of armor, the distant trumpeting of elephants that sound less like animals and more like echoes of some ancient god. The sound travels far, startling birds from trees. You can imagine villagers miles away pausing, listening, wondering what kind of omen that noise must be. At one point, the army passes through a forest thick with mist. The trees drip constantly, their trunks dark and glistening. You can smell sap and wet earth, hear the slow creak of branches bending underwater. It feels like another world, not the Alps, not yet Italy, but a dream between them. You walk carefully, boots squelching, breath steaming. The men are quieter here. Some whisper that spirits of the mountain follow, invisible in the fog. You don't laugh. You can almost feel them too, not angry, just watching. The day ends with another storm. Lightning flashes across the plains, illuminating the horizon where the Alps still loom in ghostly outline. The men pause to stare. Even from here, their peaks glow faintly, blue and eternal. The sight sends a shiver through you, a reminder that the cold doesn't vanish. It lingers in memory, waiting for its turn to return. Hannibal watches too, his face lit by the storm. You can't tell if he's remembering or warning himself. The rain turns to sleet before dawn. You wrap your cloak tighter and keep walking. The land is changing, but the war in your blood is not. Somewhere ahead, Rome sleeps behind its walls, dreaming of order and invincibility. Somewhere behind, the mountains whisper that no empire can outlast ice. You march between them, between what was and what will be, a shadow carrying frost into a world that still believes in warmth. And as the first light spills over the horizon, the world turns gold again. You squint against it, remembering how blinding snow once was, and realize the irony. Even in sunlight, you still see white. The plains stretch ahead in a long sigh of gold and shadow. After the vertical world of ice and cliffs, the horizon feels unnatural, too wide, too open, too vulnerable. You can see for miles in every direction, and that visibility feels like danger. The air is thick with the scent of damp soil and grain. It clings to your tongue like honey after months of tasting only metal and snow. The men squint against the light, unused to color. Even the clouds seem decadent, drifting lazily instead of devouring the sky. For the first time in weeks, you can hear insects instead of wind. Their soft hum sounds almost obscene. Hannibal rides at the front again, a dark silhouette against the pale dawn. His horse's hooves sink into the soft earth, leaving deep impressions, the first footprints not immediately erased by snow. He pauses often now, not from fatigue but from strategy. He knows this land isn't his, yet. It's Rome's backyard, full of allies who fear him and enemies who underestimate him. He studies every hill and stream like a scholar, every patch of trees like a potential ambush. The mountains may have tested his endurance, but this, he knows, will test his cunning. The men march quietly, their armor dull with rust, their faces drawn thin by hunger and hard nights. Yet there's a kind of strength in their weariness, the calm of those who've already survived what should have killed them. Each step feels heavier than it should, but also more certain. The rhythm of movement has returned. The body remembers what purpose feels like. The sound of marching is different here, not the crunch of ice but the soft slap of mud and grass. It's almost soothing, almost. You walk beside one of the elephants, its flank steaming gently in the morning light. It sways as it moves, each footfall shaking the earth in quiet punctuation. The handlers walk ahead of it, calling softly in their own tongue, coaxing the beast forward with pieces of bread and fruit. You remember how the Romans laughed when they first heard Hannibal was bringing elephants over the Alps. They won't laugh when they see this survivor, scarred, colossal, wrapped in frostbitten dignity. It carries on its back not just armor, but proof that impossible things can live long enough to become legend. By midday, the army reaches a river, the Trebia, cold and swift, its water green and silver under the sun. The sight of it makes the men hesitate. Another crossing. Another reminder that the world delights in obstacles. Hannibal surveys the banks, then turns to his officers. His voice when he speaks is low and steady. "The Romans are near," he says. "Let them come to us. The river will choose who it remembers." The words are cryptic, but you can sense the strategy forming behind them. The men set up camp along the northern bank. Fires sputter weakly in the damp air. You can hear the hiss of meat roasting, a rare sound of comfort mingled with the slow creak of leather and the low murmur of soldiers retelling the same story, how they survived the mountains. The tale has already changed in their mouths. Avalanches larger, storms colder, gods more visible. That's how legend begins, through repetition warmed by relief. As night falls, the fog thickens. The river's surface glows faintly, reflecting the moon. You sit near the bank, watching it move, slow, steady, indifferent. The current is hypnotic, carrying leaves, foam, fragments of branch. You think about all the things that water must have seen. Roman scouts crossing, traders' boats, soon to be corpses of men who thought themselves immortal. Every war finds its witness, and this river will soon have stories to tell. In the distance, thunder rolls. You glance toward the horizon and see flickers of light, not lightning but torches. The Romans are out there. Scouts return confirming it. An army led by the consul Tiberius Sempronius Longus has arrived. 20,000 infantry, 4,000 cavalry, disciplined, rested, confident. The news spreads through camp like a spark through dry grass. Some men mutter prayers, others sharpen blades. Hannibal says nothing. He simply watches the river, expressionless, as though waiting for it to speak first. Before dawn, the fog deepens until you can barely see your own hands. The air smells of moisture and iron. You wake to the sound of movement, quiet, deliberate. The soldiers are preparing, their armor muffled under cloaks, their faces streaked with ash to dull the shine of skin. The elephants stand motionless, great shadows breathing steam. Somewhere in the dark, Hannibal's voice carries softly, giving orders. "Let them come across. The cold will fight for us." You understand now. He means to turn the weather itself into a weapon. The Romans, warm in their campfires, will wade into the icy water unaware. The survivors of the Alps, hardened by frost and hunger, will strike from the mist. It's brilliant, cruel, inevitable. The battle begins with sound, the sudden roar of Roman horns cutting through the fog, then the splash of feet as soldiers charge into the river. You can hear the chaos even before you see it. Men shouting, shields clanging, water churning. Hannibal waits until they're halfway across before signaling. The Carthaginian cavalry bursts from the mist like a living wall, elephants trumpeting behind them. The sound is pure nightmare. The Romans falter, blinded by fog, disoriented by cold. Spears flash, horses scream. The air fills with the smell of iron and blood. You fight without thought, muscles moving on memory. The cold water bites through your boots, numbs your legs, steadies your fear. You swing, block, thrust, all rhythm, no hesitation. Around you the battle feels less like war and more like a storm with swords. The fog hides everything but flashes of motion. A Roman face contorted in shock, a soldier vanishing beneath the current, an elephant's trunk curling around a man like a snake. The sound is endless, steel on bone, breath on frost, history rewriting itself in every heartbeat. Hours blur. When the fog finally thins, the river runs red. The Roman camp burns in the distance, smoke rising in black columns. Hannibal stands on the bank, his cloak soaked and heavy, watching the flames with an expression that isn't triumph, but something colder. You stand beside him, shivering, realizing you're not sure whether from exhaustion or memory. The men cheer behind you, their voices hoarse, echoing across the valley like broken bells. Hannibal doesn't join them. His gaze stays fixed on the river, on the bodies drifting south. "The mountain taught us patience," he murmurs. "Now Rome will learn the same." That night, the air smells of wet ashes and victory. The survivors huddle around fires, laughing through cracked lips, retelling what just happened until it sounds like myth already. You can't join them. You keep looking toward the river, toward the faint glint of moonlight on moving water. The Alps feel far away now, yet somehow closer than ever, their silence still lodged inside you, the echo of wind under the surface of every thought. When sleep finally comes, it's filled with dreams of snow falling over battlefields, covering everything, dead and living alike, in quiet, merciful white. You wake before dawn, and for a moment you forget where you are. The air feels too warm, the ground too soft. Then you hear it again, the river whispering endlessly, as if carrying a message from the mountains. You've crossed the world, but the cold still waits in your bones. The smoke from the burned Roman camp lingers for days, low and oily, curling over the valley like a ghost reluctant to leave. You can smell it in your hair, your clothes, your thoughts. The river has already washed away the bodies, but the memory of their weight still hangs in the mist. The survivors of Hannibal's army move through the wreckage quietly, their footsteps squelching in mud that's half water, half blood. "You've won," they say, a word that feels heavy, almost obscene after so much death. You don't feel like victors, you feel like the cold still hasn't left. Hannibal stands on a small rise above the plain, his cloak blackened with soot, his horse's breath pluming in the morning air. His officers wait below, reluctant to speak first. He doesn't look at them. He's staring south, toward the invisible line that leads to Rome itself. His eyes are strange now, not wild but hollow, like the sky above the Alps. You can sense he's already somewhere else, already planning the next impossible thing. "They will come again," he says softly, almost to himself, "and we will remind them what winter feels like." The men spend the day gathering what they can: armor, grain, Roman shields, anything still useful. The elephants trample through the debris, searching instinctively for food. The air hums with flies. You can't shake the feeling that the land itself disapproves of what's happened, that every blade of grass remembers who bled on it. The victory is complete, but not clean. It never is. When night falls, the camp grows quiet. No songs this time, no laughter. The fires burn lower, their light flickering against the black river like candles for the dead. You sit apart, listening to the frogs calling from the marshes, the slow crackle of damp wood. The Alps are far behind you, yet the sound of wind still lives in your ears. You half expect to see snow drifting down, soft and silent to cover the evidence of what's been done. But this isn't the mountain's mercy, this is the plain's memory, and it never forgets. In the days that follow, word of the battle spreads. Local tribes come cautiously to parley. Gauls, Ligurians, men hardened by their own wars. They look at Hannibal with the wary respect reserved for gods and lunatics. They've heard the stories already. The man who crossed the Alps with elephants, the general who defeated Rome in her own land. Some bring gifts, food, wine, gold. Others bring only questions. Will he turn on them next? Will he keep his promises? Hannibal smiles the way frost smiles before it kills a flower. He tells them he's come not to conquer, but to liberate. It's half truth, half performance, and all genius. They follow him. You march again, always south, always forward. The land changes slowly from wet to dry, the air from cold to warm, but the army carries its own climate. The men still walk in silence, still sleep close to the fires, still flinch when the wind whistles too hard through the trees. You've learned that survival rewires the soul. You no longer expect comfort, you just hope for warmth that lasts until morning. One night, while crossing a ridge, you look back. The Alps are still visible on the horizon, pale blue ghosts under the stars. They seem impossibly far now, yet you know you'll never escape them. The mountains mark you like a scar you can't see. You realize the strange truth. You miss them. Not the cold, not the suffering, but the simplicity. Up there, everything was clear. Live, freeze, or die. Down here, there are too many shades of warmth, too many ways to lose your soul. At dawn, the scouts return with news. Another Roman army approaches, larger this time, led by men who've learned from their defeat. The officers murmur uneasily. Hannibal listens, then smiles, that same calm, cold smile. Good, he says. Let them bring their courage. We'll bring the weather. You don't understand what he means until later, when he orders the camp set near a swampy plain surrounded by mist. The Romans march into it at midday, sweating in their heavy armor, blinded by heat and glare. Hannibal waits until nightfall, until the fog thickens, until the temperature drops enough to make their fingers clumsy and their breath visible again. Then he attacks. The battle unfolds like a ghost story, shadows moving through vapor, blades flashing in half-light. You fight without sound, the mist swallowing shouts before they form. The Romans stumble, fall, drown in the mud. The elephants charge through them like living avalanches. It's not war, it's weather given purpose. You can almost hear the mountains laughing through the fog, their cold breath guiding the chaos. By dawn the Romans are gone, the swamps still rippling with echoes of their struggle. The survivors of the Alps have found their rhythm again, destruction measured in silence. Afterward the army rests in a grove of poplars. The trees shimmer silver in the wind, their leaves whispering like water. Hannibal walks among his men, not celebrating but observing, as if taking inventory of what's left. Not weapons, not food, but will. He stops beside one of the elephants, rests his hand on its flank, and murmurs something too soft to hear. The animal shifts, its great head lowering in response. For a moment, man and beast look like they understand each other completely, two exiles of the same frost. The sun climbs higher, turning the river nearby into a ribbon of light. The men wash the mud from their armor, their faces, their memories. You join them, plunging your hands into the cold water. It burns, but it also cleans. For the first time, the pain feels welcome. It's proof that you're still alive. That night, the wind changes. It blows from the north, carrying with it a faint chill, not enough to freeze, just enough to remind you what waits beyond the horizon. You lie awake, listening to it rustle through the camp, threading through tents and armor, finding every hollow space. It sounds almost like whispering. You can't tell whether it's the mountains calling you back or warning you not to return. You look toward Hannibal's tent. A light glows within, steady and unmoving. He's awake, of course. He never really sleeps. You imagine him hunched over his maps, tracing routes toward Rome, his fingers trembling not from fear but from the memory of frostbite. You realize he's chasing something bigger than conquest. Vindication, maybe, or escape from his own legend. He doesn't know that the mountains have already claimed him. He carries their silence wherever he goes. Before you close your eyes, you glance once more northward. The horizon glows faintly, pale as a scar in the dark. The Alps are too far to see now, but you can feel them, eternal, patient, unamused by everything happening below. They'll outlast all of it. Rome, Carthage, every name carved into the stone of history. You smile at the thought, a small private acknowledgement between survivor and mountain. The cold isn't gone, it's just sleeping, and someday, when the fires of war burn out, when empires crumble, when all the noise finally stops, the frost will rise again and cover everything, soft, white, and merciful. The army moves again before the dawn has finished bruising the sky. You rise stiff, your joints aching, your armor clammy from the night's dampness. Around you, men stir in silence. The ground is soft beneath your boots, heavy with dew, and every breath draws in the scent of wet grass, river clay, and the faint ghost of smoke from old campfires. It is warmer now, deceptively so, the kind of warmth that tricks the body into forgetting how fragile it has become. You walk, and the rhythm of it lulls you into that same fragile illusion that the mountains were only a dream, and that you are somehow free of them. The land opens into wide fields, a sea of gold and green waving in the morning wind. The Alps are just a pale shadow far behind, their teeth hidden by haze. The men murmur to one another about Rome, about the riches of the south, about wives and children who might still be waiting. Hope is a dangerous luxury. It makes men careless. Hannibal knows this. He rides ahead, scanning every ridge and hollow, seeing not beauty but advantage. To him the land is still an opponent. Every hill could hide a legion. Every forest could hold a trap. His gaze moves constantly, calculating, hungry. At midday you pass through a ruined village. The roofs have caved in, and the walls are black with soot. Chickens scatter among the rubble, ghosts of domestic peace fleeing from war's echo. You step around a broken toy in the mud, a carved wooden horse missing one leg, and for a moment the world seems unbearably small. The locals have long fled, leaving only traces: a bucket half buried in ash, a torn sandal, the faint smell of oil and herbs that lingers in burned kitchens. The men scavenge what they can. One finds a small cask of wine and laughs until he coughs. You drink from it too, and it tastes like dust and sunlight. By the time you reach the next ridge, the air has changed again. It feels heavier, charged with something invisible. You can sense it before you see it. Movement in the distance, faint glints of bronze under the sun. The Romans are out there. Scouts return at a gallop, their faces hard. Another army approaches from the south. Better supplied, better rested, twice your size. The officers gather around Hannibal. No one dares to suggest retreat. He listens, quiet, patient, then nods once. "Then we will fight on our terms," he says. The chosen ground lies near Lake Trasimene, where the hills bend around the water like a half-closed hand. It's perfect. Narrow paths, steep ridges, and the lake's edge forming a natural barrier. The men work silently, preparing ambush positions along the slopes, hiding behind rocks and shrubs. The elephants are kept farther back, their dark shapes blending with the forest. Hannibal moves among the ranks, his presence quiet but magnetic. He doesn't inspire with speeches anymore. He doesn't need to. His survival has become its own sermon. The morning of the battle dawns misty and pale. The lake glows like steel beneath the fog. You can hear the Romans long before you see them, the steady march of thousands of feet, the creak of armor, the clatter of shields. Their confidence carries on the air like incense. They believe this will be a simple victory. Another story for the Senate. You almost pity them. Almost. Then Hannibal raises his hand. It's barely a gesture, but it ripples through the ranks like lightning through a tree. Horns sound once, low, mournful, the voice of the mountains returning. The valley erupts. Soldiers surge from hiding, blades flashing, voices rising in a chorus of rage. The Romans stagger, caught between water and death, their formation collapsing before it even forms. The fog turns red. You move through it like a shadow, striking, blocking, striking again. The noise is overwhelming, the scream of men, the crash of shields, the deep, guttural bellows of the elephants breaking through the mist like gods made of thunder and bone. Time dissolves. The battle becomes a rhythm, not of tactics, but of survival. You catch glimpses: a Roman standard falling into the mud, a horse screaming as it rears, Hannibal's silhouette moving through the haze with terrifying calm. His sword rises and falls in perfect silence, each motion measured, inevitable. Around him, the Carthaginian army flows like water, consuming everything in its path. The fog thickens with the steam of blood and breath. When it finally begins to lift, there is no sound left but the lapping of the lake against the shore. By afternoon, it's over. The Roman army is gone, drowned, cut down, or vanished into the mist. The survivors of the Alps stand among the ruins of yet another legend. The air is heavy, humid, full of the sweet, metallic scent of death. The men don't cheer. They've learned that victory feels no different from survival. Hannibal walks among the dead in silence, his eyes fixed not on them, but on the mountains reflected faintly in the lake's surface. You realize then what he's looking at, his reflection beside theirs. The ghosts are never far. That night, the lake glows faintly under the moon, its surface calm, almost beautiful. The men camp along the shore, too exhausted to build fires. You lie awake, listening to the soft hiss of water against stone. Every ripple sounds like a sigh. You think of all the rivers you've crossed, the frozen torrents of the Alps, the red flood of the Trebia, and now this quiet lake swallowing empires whole. Each has taken something from you, some part of warmth or memory that won't return. You wonder if there's anything left to lose. Hannibal sits apart, a single figure at the water's edge. His cloak is wet, his hair tangled with ash, but his posture is unbroken. You watch him for a long time, until you realize he isn't staring at the lake but listening to it. Perhaps he hears what you do, the faint, constant murmur of the mountains, echoing through the water. You can almost imagine the peaks whispering approval, or maybe warning. The wind rises briefly, carrying a chill that shouldn't exist this far south. You shiver, but not from cold. It's something else, recognition perhaps. The mountains may be distant, but they've followed you here, patient as always. The next day dawns too bright. The sky washed clean as if pretending nothing happened. Birds return to the trees, singing over a field that still reeks of blood. The men move about like phantoms, cleaning weapons, binding wounds, counting the living. You watch them and realize how few are left from that first crossing. Each face is a story the mountains began but never finished. Hannibal rides past, his horse stepping carefully through the mud, his eyes fixed south again. The Alps, the rivers, the fog, all of it behind him now. Only Rome remains. As the army marches on, you glance one last time at the lake. Its surface ripples under the wind, glinting like polished metal. Somewhere beneath it the Romans sleep, their armor slowly rusting, their bones cradled in silt. The water laps softly at the shore, the same rhythm as the mountain wind. You turn away, following the column, the sound fading behind you but never gone. You know it will return. Maybe in your dreams, maybe in the echo of wind through the camp at night. The mountains never stop calling. They just change their voice. You move south now through a world that seems to shimmer with unreality. The grass is greener, the air warmer, the rivers calmer. All the things you once prayed for when your fingers were blue and your breath came out as fog. Yet somehow this gentleness feels more foreign than the cold ever did. The army has become a moving ruin. Men wrapped in patched cloaks, skin scarred and darkened, armor hanging loose on frames hardened by starvation and frost. The elephants, what few remain, march like monuments, their every step a slow hymn to survival. You can see the fear in the faces of villagers who watch from afar, not fear of invasion but of the unnatural, of creatures that should not still exist. The road ahead cuts through rolling fields dotted with cypress and stone villas. You can smell olives, smoke, and something sweet, maybe figs ripening in the heat. The land is alive in a way the Alps never were. You hear frogs at night, and bees during the day. It should feel comforting. But it doesn't. The contrast only sharpens the distance between who you were before the mountains and who you are now. You realize you've forgotten the texture of warmth, the weight of peace. You're built for endurance now, not comfort. Hannibal rides at the head, his eyes fixed toward the heart of Italy. He's thinner, the hollows in his cheeks shadowed, but his presence feels larger than ever, as if the very air bends around him. Each victory has stripped away something human. He's become an idea wearing a body, cold, unstoppable, untiring. When he speaks, the men still listen, though not as followers anymore. They listen like witnesses, waiting to see what destiny sounds like. Scouts report more Roman legions mustering farther south. The Senate refuses to believe he can reach them. refuses to believe that an army from across the sea has burned through snow and stone to arrive here. But the rumors spread faster than the truth. Peasants whisper that he commands the dead, that the mountains themselves fight for him. Some even say the frost follows wherever he goes. You almost laugh when, one morning, the air turns unexpectedly cool, and a faint mist curls over the fields. Maybe the peasants aren't wrong. You cross another river, smaller this time. Its water bright and quick. The soldiers splash through it with unease. Rivers have become omens now. You remember each one, the frozen torrents of the Alps, the red flood of Trebia, the misted expanse of Trasimene. Every crossing has taken something from you, and this one will too, though you don't yet know what. The current bites at your boots, reminding you that water never forgets. By midday, the sun beats hard on your neck. The men strip off their cloaks, their skin steaming in the light. The elephants stir the air with their ears, flicking dust and insects. The smell of sweat, leather, and oil fills the valley. You march until the horizon begins to shimmer with heat, and when camp is finally ordered, the ground itself feels alive, humming with warmth, pulsing faintly under your hands. The fires that night burn lower, as if the air itself resists more flame. You sit with a few others, sharing dry bread and a skin of wine. No one speaks of Rome anymore. It's no longer a destination, just an inevitability. Later, Hannibal calls his officers to him. You can't hear the words, only see their faces shifting in the firelight, cautious, hopeful, afraid. When the meeting ends, he stands apart, looking north toward the barely visible outline of the Alps. You follow his gaze. Even from this distance, the mountains look like ghosts, faint blue shapes dissolving into the clouds. You imagine their peaks whispering, not to him, but about him, the kind of quiet that mountains keep for legends, not men. As the night deepens, a strange calm settles over the camp. The usual murmurs fade. The men sleep quickly, their exhaustion total. You stay awake, listening to the insects, the crackle of cooling embers, the distant rumble of thunder. It takes you a moment to realize it's not thunder. It's an avalanche echoing across the far horizon. You smile, because even here, hundreds of miles away, the Alps are still speaking. Their voice carries through earth and air, patient, relentless. In the morning, the world is washed clean again. Dew on the grass, clouds drifting lazily. The air smells faintly of rain and iron. You begin marching before sunrise, the sound of your steps rolling through the valley like distant surf. The rhythm is hypnotic, the kind that draws you inward. You think about everything you've left behind, names you no longer remember, faces that might not exist anymore. The war has replaced memory with geography. Your past is measured in passes, rivers, and dead cities. Around midday, a rider approaches from the rear, breathless, his horse lathered with foam. He brings news. Another Roman force lies ahead, blocking the road to the south. This one commanded by Gaius Terentius Varro and Lucius Aemilius Paulus, the combined strength of Rome itself. Hannibal listens without emotion. "Then we'll teach them what the cold taught us," he says simply. His voice carries through the ranks like the first breath of winter. That night, camp settles in eerie silence. The men sharpen their blades in rhythm, the sound like insects buzzing. The elephants sway restlessly, their chains creaking. You feel the weight of something vast pressing down. Not fear, not yet, but anticipation. It feels like the pause between avalanches, when the world holds its breath before collapsing again. You realize that this campaign, this march, this impossible defiance, it's all been one long descent. The mountains were only the beginning. The true fall is still coming. Hannibal walks among the fires, his face lit by the glow. He doesn't speak to the men tonight. He doesn't need to. Everyone understands what waits beyond dawn. You catch his eye briefly, or think you do. In that glance, there's something you didn't expect. Sorrow. It's faint but unmistakable. Perhaps even the man who commands elephants and storms knows how much of himself he's already left on those icy slopes behind him. You lie awake until the stars blur. Somewhere beyond the horizon, the legions of Rome prepare, clean armor, full bellies, perfect formation. And here you are, wrapped in torn furs, skin hardened by frost, eyes hollow but burning. When you finally close your eyes, you dream of snow again, but this time it's falling over warm fields, covering them slowly, mercifully, until the land looks clean once more. The next morning will bring Carne, though you don't yet know the name. You only know the feeling, the hush before the mountain breaks loose again. The dawn before Carne arrives as a false peace, the kind of morning that feels like forgiveness until you breathe it in and realize it is just the world holding still before the storm. You wake to a sky the color of copper and dust. The wind barely moves, the air dense enough to taste. The fields stretch flat and silent, a stage too calm for what is about to happen. The men stir slowly, their movements heavy and deliberate. You can hear the faint scrape of whetstones on blades, the quiet murmurs of men reciting prayers to gods who've long since stopped listening. The Alps feel impossibly far now, but you know they are here, not in sight, but in the marrow of every survivor. The cold that once froze your skin now burns behind your eyes. It's a strange, invisible inheritance, endurance carved into bone. Hannibal stands apart, as always, his cloak rippling faintly in the dead wind. He looks not at the horizon but at the ground, tracing lines in the dust with the tip of his boot, the ghost of a map that only he understands. His officers watch him like men trying to interpret a god. By the time the sun lifts above the hills, the Roman legions are visible, a sea of red and bronze, perfectly ordered, glittering under the heat. 70,000 men, an empire in miniature, marching in rhythm. Their standards glint, like spears of sunlight. The earth trembles beneath their feet. You can feel it in your chest, a deep, steady heartbeat that belongs not to them but to the inevitable. You glance at Hannibal, expecting fear. Instead, you see something colder, satisfaction. They have learned nothing, he says softly, almost tenderly. Good. The Carthaginian line forms in silence. Dust rises, stinging eyes, sticking to sweat. You take your place among men who no longer flinch at death. The air smells of leather, oil, and the faint sweetness of crushed grass. The elephants stand behind the cavalry, their shadows stretching long across the plain like relics of another world. You can hear them breathing, deep, slow, steady, the rhythm of living mountains. Somewhere, a horn sounds, low and mournful. It could be a battle signal, or the mountains themselves sighing through the wind. The first charge comes from the Romans, a tidal surge of bodies and metal, a roar that drowns the world. The ground shakes, birds scatter, the air fills with dust. You brace yourself, the sound hitting before the soldiers do. When they collide with the Carthaginian center, the impact is like thunder breaking inside your bones. Men scream, shields splinter, the line bends but doesn't break. Hannibal's formation is a trap disguised as desperation, a crescent drawing them in, narrowing, tightening. The Romans push forward, drunk on momentum. They don't see the jaws closing. You fight as though in a trance. The noise around you becomes a single continuous note, the kind that erases thought. You see flashes, a Roman face contorted in rage, an elephant's tusk glinting red, a soldier slipping on blood and vanishing beneath the press. The sun climbs higher, the heat suffocating, the dust so thick you can barely breathe. Time dissolves into heartbeat and instinct. Somewhere to your left, Hannibal rides along the line, shouting orders that sound like echoes. The men respond not with words but with movement, a choreography of survival perfected in snow and stone. Hours pass. The Roman formation collapses inward on itself, suffocating under its own numbers. You can see it happening, slow and terrible, the middle crushed, the flanks encircled. The air becomes a furnace. the ground slick with the ruin of flesh. You realize with detached horror that you've stopped feeling anything at all. The body moves. The soul watches. When the dust finally begins to settle, the field is no longer a battlefield but a landscape remade. Red, quiet, almost serene. The Romans fall by the tens of thousands. Those who try to flee are cut down by cavalry waiting in the rear. The sun slides lower, and the shadows of the dead stretch long and thin across the ground. The wind rises briefly, carrying with it the faint scent of the sea. You look up, and for the first time since crossing the Alps, you think you see snow, not real, of course, but a shimmer of pale light drifting in the air, soft as memory. It's as if the mountains are watching, approving, reclaiming their students. Hannibal dismounts near the center of the field, his boots sinking into the mud. He looks around at what he's made. Not pride, not triumph, but recognition. He understands the scale of it, the weight of it. Victory this complete feels wrong, obscene in its perfection. Rome will bleed, he says quietly, but we will never be warm again. You don't know if he means himself, his army, or history, maybe all of them. The survivors gather as the light fades. Fires dot the plain like stars fallen to earth. The men eat in silence, their eyes hollow. Some stare north, others south. No one looks east where the sun will rise again. You walk among them, hearing the slow murmur of voices retelling what happened, each word heavier than the last. You know the story will change, grow, take on the weight of legend. But tonight, it is just exhaustion, breath and blood, and the knowledge that something irretrievable has been lost in the process of winning. Later, when the camp falls quiet, you find yourself alone at the edge of the field. The moonlight turns the world silver. You can see the faint glimmer of helmets scattered across the grass, the curve of a Roman shield half buried in dirt, the silhouette of an elephant standing motionless, steam rising from its back. The air is cooler now. You close your eyes and hear it, that old familiar sound, wind moving through stone, far away but unmistakable. The Alps calling through distance and memory. You realize they never left you. They were never behind you at all. They're here, in the chill that never fades from your skin, in the silence that follows every victory, in the part of you that will always long for white horizons and quiet deaths. The mountains are patient. They lend their strength, but they never give it freely. One day, they will take it back. You turn north, the wind brushing your face like cold fingers. The fires flicker behind you. The field glows faintly under the moon, and for the briefest moment, the world feels still, as if time itself is exhaling. Somewhere in that quiet, you hear Hannibal's voice. Distant and low, we crossed the Alps once, but they never stopped crossing us. You breathe out slowly. The air tastes of smoke, salt, and snow. You think of the men who never made it past the ice, of the elephants frozen mid-step, of the whispering peaks that watched it all. You understand now, none of it was conquest. It was communion. The wind sighs once more, carrying the sound of distant avalanches rolling through eternity. You imagine them smoothing the ridges, burying the scars, tucking the bones of men and beasts alike beneath white sheets of mercy. The Alps will remember, but they will never speak. They never need to. And as you close your eyes, the cold finally feels kind. The fires fade first, one by one, small orange circles dimming into grey. The camp falls silent except for the low murmur of wind crossing the plain. You sit alone, watching the smoke rise and vanish into the night, tracing thin lines toward the stars. The air has cooled, carrying with it the faint, clean scent of water far away. It smells almost like snow again. You breathe slower now. The world feels softer, less certain. You picture the Alps under moonlight, their white peaks gleaming, their valleys hushed, their silence infinite. You imagine the ghosts of the soldiers still marching there, not in pain but in memory, their footprints filling gently with snow, erasing the noise of history one step at a time. The longer you sit, the more the sounds blur together. the rustle of grass, the distant creak of leather, the faint breath of the elephants dreaming nearby. The war, the journey, the ice, it all folds in on itself until only the rhythm of your breathing remains. In, out, the same rhythm as wind through stone, as the mountain's heartbeat under all things. The stars above look cold but kind. You realize that even in silence the past hums, soft, endless, forgiving. Maybe the mountains never wanted worship. Maybe they only wanted witnesses. You close your eyes and give them that much. The last of the firelight flickers against your face. The world narrows to warmth, breath, darkness. You exhale once more, and in that moment the wind sighs back, faint and final. It sounds like a candle going out.